All right, good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm delighted that you'll be here to meet our three finalists for the new assistant principal of Milford High School. Our first candidate this evening is going to be Amy Marshall. So Amy, please come on up, and Amy's going to introduce herself and then take your questions.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. My name is Amy Marshall. I am currently the coordinator of instruction and technology at Assabet Valley Collaborative. A collaborative is a small alternative setting for students with social emotional learning disabilities who need a placement outside of a large public school. I would like to be the next assistant principal at Milford Public Schools at the high school. And the real reason I want to do that is I see Milford as a thriving community. I think that the diversity of the population, the student population, and the population of the town is a value. And I think that making sure education for all students, making sure that a comprehensive and equal education for all students is very, very important. So for me, one of the most important aspects of what I would like to put forward as an assistant principal is working with teachers to make sure that students are able to learn and are able to access curriculum through supports such as Universal Design for Learning, and students are able to have access to the curriculum that they deserve. Okay. I'm going to open it up for questions just to see if you have any specific questions about my background or my philosophies or anything that you may have concerns or questions with. Okay. Thanks. Hi.
I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about the collaborative that you work with.
Sure.
Obviously, you have an extensive teaching experience
Mhm.
at Uxbridge High School, and
Yes.
moved into some more administrative roles. But the collaborative, I actually looked it up, and I was trying to figure out exactly what they do, and it seems like there's small schools within.
So a collaborative, yeah. So a collaborative, our collaborative has different components. I work at the middle high school component. So we service students grades 5 through 12 with social emotional learning disabilities. 99% of our students are on IEPs and have left a traditional public school setting for various reasons. So I have students who are unable to toggle the expectations, the emotional expectations of a public school, who feel lost in a larger setting and so are there in order to access education in that way. We also have students who are sent out of public school education for things like threats, weapons, things like that. And they, because they're on an IEP and it was seen as part of their disability, are sent to an alternative setting, and we are that alternative setting. And so we service your students that are most at risk.
So I was trying to get a sense of
Sure.
how large that is.
It's small. We have a total of 65 students, and each student has a one-to-one clinician. So they meet with that clinician on a weekly basis, and they go through your Mass State frameworks, your core educational classes. And additionally, they also go through a clinical rotation where they do group therapy, DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, music therapy, art therapy. So that is it. And right now, as an administrator, I do lots of different things. So I work on scheduling, I work on all of their transcripts, I make sure that the students are placed in the proper classes, and I, on a day-to-day basis, I work on the floor. So if a student is struggling in class, we have a system by which they put a sign out and someone comes and gets them. And I work with them in a timeout space to assess sort of what's going on with them, what's their behavior, and how we can mitigate some of the behaviors and make sure that they are ready to be in a classroom and ready to learn. So, yeah. Yes.
When you transitioned from being an English teacher to being an administrator, what was your greatest challenge?
I think I didn't understand the role of an administrator, I think, initially. I thought that, you go in and you do discipline and you do scheduling and you do all those things. But really, the way I'm involved in it, it's so every day on the floor. There's a whole lot more work. There's a lot of, incident reports. There's a whole lot of working with guardians and working with a student's team in order to make sure they're getting everything they need. And so it was completely different than what I thought. And I think that was the biggest challenge. I not only had to get used to an administrative position, but an entirely different environment. The collaborative world is different than public education. And so getting used to that while toggling the role of an administrator was difficult. And the first year is always really difficult. Yep. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Chromebooks. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. Technology. That's a great question. I actually spent, I want to say, the last half of my career at Uxbridge as a one-to-one school. We went one-to-one in 2012, and so we had iPads. And tech integration takes a long time. What happens is that you'll have early adopters who are your teachers and your students who start using tech right away. They run with it, and they see it as such a value added to their repertoire. And then you have teachers that hold back a little bit more to see where it's going, and then you have people that are just absolutely, I'm not using that thing, and I'm going to teach the way I'm going to teach. And so when you're rolling out an initiative like a one-to-one initiative, it's going to take, I'd say, 3 to 5 years to build, to build the repertoire of your teachers to make sure that they are using the technology effectively and not just as a toy or as something that's new and exciting for students, but to actually engage them appropriately in the learning. So I think that what happens is with your early adopters, they're going to be your teachers that lead the charge for their colleagues. And as an administrator, it's my job to help them lead that charge and to sort of push and say, you have this great new tool. The whole world is open to you because now that you have access to the internet, you really have access to anything you could possibly use and or need. And that is a shift when people are used to teaching the same thing in the same month in the same way. And so you have to move their mindset a little bit, and that takes a little bit of time and a little bit of planning. Once you're early adopters, get your middle of the road people who are questioning some aspects of it but really are eager to enhance their practice. Your teachers and your faculty that are reticent to use it either eventually come along, or as an administrator, it's my job to push them along. So I would say, in a short answer, in 3 to 5 years, I would suspect that you will see about 90% of the faculty using the technology on a day-to-day basis, rather than carrying around those big giant books. Okay. Sure.
Talk to us about sort of what a great classroom looks like, and talk to us about what a good school looks like.
Okay. A great classroom looks different in all classrooms. So it really depends on what you're doing that day. For me, when I walk into a classroom, I want to see the students engaged, and I want to see them working collaboratively. I want to see them questioning. I want to see them having a Socratic dialogue. I want to see the students doing the work. The teachers should be your facilitators. They're the people that are walking around making sure that this model is able to work well. It doesn't happen on the first day. It never will. So your teachers have to teach the students how to work together, how to have a dialogue, how to create higher order questions. And once the students are able to do that and run with it on their own, you can see it working in classrooms. Your classrooms, if I'm looking at a traditional classroom where it's set up in rows, it's not conducive to learning in that way. So what I liked in my own classroom is I experimented with different things. I started with squares, so 4 students, and then I ended up with 2, I had like 36 kids in a class. So I had a lot of pairs, but those pairs were easily regrouped into quads. And those quads are really, really beneficial in helping students with writing, because the students can actually read each other's writing, assess each other's writing, and say, hey, this is what you have missing here. You have no support for this argument. Maybe you need to rethink what you're doing here. And once students can start looking at other students' work analytically, they can start questioning in their own mind why they're doing things. And I think that that is a really, really important skill to instill in students. Now, is every classroom going to look like that? No. Different teachers have different methods. I'm a facilitator. I like to facilitate. It took me a long time to get there. Initially, I think everybody starts off teaching like they learned. And so you start off sitting your students in rows and standing up there and teaching. And what you learn is that that doesn't work for every student. It only works for a handful of students. And so getting to know your students on a basis as a human and as a learner is really, really important. And so what I would like to see when I walk into a classroom as an administrator is that my teachers know their students, that they know their learning styles, that they know what's going on with those students outside of class, that they really have a sense of who that student is as an individual, and it's their goal to develop that student and to make sure that that student has everything that they need in order to succeed in life. Because in my opinion, our job here is not to teach students subjects, but to teach students how to think independently and to be what they want to be. And there was a second part of your question that I don't remember, so. Yeah.
Moving out the classroom, think about the whole school. What is a great
Sure.
school for some elements of a great school?
Okay, excuse me. Well, for me, I think a great school looks like students challenging teachers and teachers challenging students in good ways. I don't mean like, but I mean in good ways. I think that it's important for people to walk around and smile and high five and say hello to each other and know who people are. And so I think that having teachers that enjoy spending time with each other and having students that enjoy spending time with each other and with teachers is really, really important. I think that having administrators that are visible in the building is really, really important, so that students know that everybody in the building is here for them and to support them in their success. And when they're struggling, to help support them through whatever that struggle happens to be. Okay. Yep. Yes?
How would you nurture a positive school culture amongst students, and how would you do the same amongst faculty and staff?
Okay. I think I'm generally a fairly positive person. And so for me, instilling culture with students is really important in getting to know them. So being present at lunches, being present at sporting events, being present at theater, whatever the students are doing, I should be there. I should get to know the students as individuals and not just as a group or a class. I want to know who they are and what their goals are. And I think that that interest and the idea that we should all care and take care of each other builds positive climate. I think it works well with teachers as well. if teachers know that as an administrator, I'm there to hear their concerns, I might not always agree with them, but I can hear them out and give them my perspective. I think that builds climate. I think when teachers work together and administrators work with teachers, it builds positive climate. There should be room for discourse in any school, and whether or not we all agree, as long as we can give support to what we're saying, I think that's important. And I think that those things go with just building relationships with people. Sure.
Is there anything that you think maybe is a little bit challenging to you coming into the principal role that you haven't served in that capacity?
Sure.
Or is there something you're potentially anxious about, or
Well,
you know it might be a little, take a little extra?
yeah, I think learning any new role is in itself a little bit daunting and challenging. And so for me, I would have to learn all the systems. I would want to make sure that I had a really good handle on the expectations of me before I started the job. I would also, I'm moving from a small high school. Uxbridge is not gigantic, right? And I went to a very, very small collaborative, and then coming to Milford, which is about twice the size of Uxbridge. The sheer size would be interesting to me because I am used to knowing everyone. And I would want to get to know all of the students, and I understand that with 1,200 students, that might be really difficult. And so that would be hard for me, I think. And I would make my best effort to get to know students because I think that that's really important.
Amy, one of the things that we ask our assistant principals to do is to really lead our efforts to intervene effectively with kids that are experiencing difficulty in school. And that can be academic difficulty, that can be social or emotional difficulty. I know that you've got some pretty extensive experience, particularly with working with
Right.
students who are in need of intervention. So can you share with us sort of some of what you learned from your experience about how to most effectively help young adults who are struggling in school and how you think you can add value to our work in that domain here at high school?
Absolutely. So for me, as a teacher, I'm going to go back to my teacher first. And then as a teacher, what I found was most beneficial to working with students who were struggling or students who were in need of some extra support was to, again, it's all about relationships. It's all about relationships. So getting to know them, talking to them, what's going on? There's something deeper going on. I know you're not, attempting just not to do work in my class, right? So what's going on that you don't want to engage in my class or that you can't engage in my class? And building that relationship and finding the proper supports from there were important. So obviously as a teacher, you can't handle everything on your own, right? I know that I need to reach out to a school psychologist or a counselor or somebody if there's something larger going on. In my current role, what I find is that we focus on behavior shaping and looking at the root cause of behavior, which is pretty similar, I think, to what I was doing as a teacher, but this is definitely more planned out. So we look and see what is the function of the student's behavior. If I look at their background, a lot of times I know the function of their behavior, whether they're trying to avoid or escape, if they are seeking attention, and why that, how that plays out and why. And we try to tier our response based on the function of their behavior. So if I have a student who's perpetually avoiding class, it's important for me not to give that student a suspension because that is feeding their avoidance behavior, right? So what I want to do is get that student back into that classroom. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to work through the underlying thoughts and emotions behind it. And I'm going to give that student skills. We use DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy, and they have different skills that they can practice before we get back into class. I go with that student back into class. I make sure that they're engaging before I leave them, because if their function of their behavior is to avoid, I don't want to enforce that. I don't want to reinforce that. I want to make sure that I am doing exactly the opposite of that. So.
And we're just about close to time, so
Okay.
I'd like to leave our parents and students with, I'll give you an opportunity to do so.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you all for being here. I think that this is a really nice way to meet you fairly formally, actually. And I look forward to meeting you informally if I have the opportunity. So thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Second candidate this evening is Christine Rivetti Weinstein. So, Christine, coming up, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to our community, and then you'll take some questions. All right, please, coming up.
So I just want to start by saying thank you. I want to thank Principal Otlin and also the search committee that I met with last week. Thank the district administration and the school committee. And also to you, the community members, the parents and the students for being here tonight, and also who are going to be watching at home. It's been a really great day so far. I feel kind of like an adopted member of Hawk Nation for a day, and that's really been nice. I've really enjoyed getting to learn about the school and the diversity here, and also the school's commitment to high achievement. And it's been really a great pleasure to be a part of this process. So I want to thank everybody for that. So just to start off by telling you a little bit more about myself, more than what you could read on paper. I grew up in Canton, and I'm a product of the Canton Public Schools. I'm proud to say that. I did my undergraduate work at UMass Amherst. And although I was a biology major right from freshman year, I didn't really know what I wanted my career path to be. I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do with that degree. And as a lot of my classmates were choosing careers in medicine and going on to med school, or careers in scientific research, none of those really felt like they fit my personality. Because what I was really feeling I was passionate about was helping other people. So I decided to take a risk, and I decided to pursue a degree in education. So I went to Harvard and got my master's in education in teaching and in curriculum writing. And shortly after graduating, I was hired in Attleboro to be a science teacher. I taught biology and chemistry at all levels. I did that for my first 11 years there. After my 11th year, the science department head at that time, and just so that you know, in Attleboro they use content coordinator and department head sort of interchangeably, but they're the same thing. She retired, and I was hired to take that position. So I've been a department head for the last 4 years. In my role as a department head, I still teach. I teach a reduced schedule, and it's primarily AP biology. I supervise and evaluate 14 staff members. And I work as a member of the leadership team, and I work regularly with other administrators, other department heads, and deans of students. And a lot of the work that we do centers around evaluations, it centers around curriculum, it centers around classroom management issues, and also school-wide operations and management. And my days are rarely predictable. I often, there are fires that come up you have to put out. And also I schedule regular observations with my teachers, but all it takes is one parent email or one parent phone call or one classroom management concern for me to completely shift my focus for that day. What really excites me about a potential leadership position here in Milford is that the enthusiasm and the commitment to learning here just permeates this building. Everyone that I've spoken to, you can just tell how much this community matters to them. Attleboro and Milford are very similar demographically. There's a lot of diversity in Attleboro, just as there is in Milford. The size of the schools is very comparable. And although they're both suburban communities, they both deal with issues that you would see more typical of an urban district. Just really excited to potentially take a role here. Attleboro, in my tenure there, we were at risk of losing our credibility and having our state accountability status reduced, and I'm proud to say that I was part of the process by which we succeeded in maintaining both of those. So I think that that's experience that would translate well here too. So that's a little bit about me. So any questions you guys have, I would love to field at this time. Oh, well, nice to meet you. So just if you couldn't hear, the question was about school choice and if that's an issue in Attleboro. It's not an issue to the same degree that it is in Milford. So students do and can choose other schools from Attleboro. So they can choose to go to Fian, they can choose to go to Tri-County if they want, but it's not like Milford where a student in Attleboro can choose to go to North Attleboro or a community that's surrounding. So we don't deal with it to the same degree that Milford does. I know that that's a huge issue in Milford. I know that financially it's of concern because Milford is still paying for that student even though they're not going to Milford High, and so that's an issue. So unfortunately I can't really speak on how we deal with that in Attleboro because it's not the same problem. Yeah.
You mentioned that you supervise and evaluate staff and teachers.
Yep.
How have you handled a difficult evaluation with a faculty?
So handling a difficult evaluation with a faculty member is tricky. It's a tough conversation to have. I haven't ever had to deal with an overall poor performance. So with our evaluation system, there are different standards that you rate a teacher in. They're either needs improvement or proficient or exemplary. And so a teacher might get a needs improvement in a particular standard, but overall their performance is still considered proficient. So ultimately, the way you have to handle that is these are conversations that have to happen well before you give that final evaluation, whether it's a formative evaluation report or a summative evaluation report. You can't just surprise a teacher and be like, oh, and here's your report, you're not proficient in this area. Because ultimately it gives the evaluation process a reputation of being punitive. And ultimately you should start from a place where the evaluation process is an area for growth. And so if a teacher isn't meeting your expectation for growth to the point where you feel like you might need to tell them that there's an area that needs improvement, that conversation has to happen long before the time where you're documenting that, to be specific. And so the way that I've dealt with that is that I meet with my teachers monthly, whether the evaluation system calls for that or not. And the reason that I do that is because it forces me to get into their classrooms more regularly, and it also allows us to have conversations where I can start discussing any particular areas of concern. And it's important for me as the evaluator to also provide opportunity for growth in the form of practical considerations and practical feedback, and also any particular resources. I also oftentimes, if there's a teacher I'm concerned about, I'll give them a teacher that maybe they should go observe. So you're struggling with getting kids to work in a collaborative environment. This is a teacher that does this really, really well. You should, I'll cover your class if you want to go observe that teacher and get some ideas. And because I've been able to build a rapport of trust with my faculty, they don't think they're getting in trouble for that. And they'll actually be like, oh, well, Christine suggested this. I want to go see how this person does it. And they'll go in and do it. And so as long as I see growth, it should never get to a point where I have to specifically document them as needing improvement. You're welcome. Yep.
How would you characterize a positive school culture among students, and how would you say with faculty and staff?
So I think that this is sort of there's two areas here. You can do it by how you present yourself, and you do it by how you approach either the students or the faculty. So in how you present yourself, the key is that you have to always have a positive attitude, and you have to model what your expectations of others are. That's part of being a leader. You also have to allow yourself to be vulnerable. If you're not vulnerable, then you're just seen as this person that's in a leadership position, and they're not a real human in terms of having bad days or having emotions. And so it's really important that you allow yourself to be vulnerable. You've got to approach it by knowing what it is you do not know and being open to learning new things, because ultimately we all have the ability to grow. And I think if you approach the faculty that way and students, you're going to get the same result, which is having them buy into what you're trying to get them to accomplish. So in your approach with, others, you have to be a collaborative leader. You have to solicit feedback. You can't just be a dictator where you're saying, well, I'm the assistant principal, so this is what you're doing. You have to ask them for feedback. You've got to see kind of where they're at. You really need to be present with them And by present, I don't mean like I'm going to be at the football game. I mean mindful. So when you're having a conversation with a faculty member or with a student, you shouldn't be on your phone, right? You should be giving them those few minutes to show them that they matter. And I am going to give you this time and be completely all in. And I think that that builds a positive culture because you're showing them what you expect of them. I think it's important to try to create a culture where people actually, I mean, it's always nice to be liked, and that does matter. It goes both ways. You respect them, they'll respect you. And I think it's important to come up with different ways that you could get faculty and students to sort of buy into being a part of something greater than themselves. So if I had a student that was repeatedly skipping class, I think the important thing is to get down to the root cause of that behavior. So is it just their biology class that they're skipping? You know, why is that? What time of day is that class? What's going on in that student's life outside of school that's causing them to keep missing that class? Is it a conflict with the teacher? So I think the first thing you need to do is it starts with a conversation with that student. So just disciplining them is never going to result in any change, right? And I think once you figure out what the problem is, let's say it's a conflict with that teacher and so they don't want to go to that class, I think you need to have sort of a mediation between that teacher and that student. Why is this not working? And where can we get to a place where it will work? You know, if you can't get along with someone, you're never going to be successful. And if you don't believe that that teacher cares about you, you're never going to be successful. And so it's important as the leader to step in and try to get those two people on the same page, because I think ultimately all teachers care about their students. Maybe it's just not being communicated correctly. And so I think getting at that root cause is the number one priority in a situation like that. You're welcome. Yes? I think the biggest challenge is going to be sort of time management and being able to prioritize things. I mean, obviously, as an assistant principal, the philosophical approach is very similar to my role as a department head. The biggest change is going to be being pulled in a bunch of different directions all the time and being able to sort of prioritize things, take a deep breath, and I'm going to have to be even more vulnerable than I already am. And I think that those things are going to be the hardest transitions. And I think once I allow myself to have that sort of learning curve and I start prioritizing things and not afraid to ask for help when and if I need it, I think everything else, I think I have all the other aspects of leadership I'm going to need to be successful, as long as I can give myself the time to learn how to manage my time and figure out how to prioritize things. I think that'll be the biggest challenge. Yep. Yeah, of course. Do I think I'm ready to give up teaching? I don't ever think I'll give up teaching. Being a leader is teaching in and of itself. I think I'm just transitioning to teaching a different group of people. So will I miss teaching young people and teenagers? Of course. Of course I'll miss that. But that joy that I have in the classroom is a joy that I want all teachers and educators to experience. And so I look at this new position as a place where I can help all teachers get to that place of joy and happiness that I experienced. So that would be my answer to that. You're welcome. Yeah. If a bullying incident is brought to my attention, well, first and foremost, you absolutely take it completely seriously. The important thing is to make the person that's bringing it to your attention feel safe and comfortable and let them know. Well, I mean, there's a couple things. Is it the person that's the victim? Is it someone that's witnessing the bullying? If it's someone that's witnessing, I think it's very important to tell them that what they've done is something that they should be praised for. It's important that they came forward. It's not okay to just be a bystander in those situations. If it's the victim themselves, obviously I want to remove that person from the situation. So if it's, let's say, they're being bullied in their current class, I'm not going to be like, thanks for reporting that, go back to class. Like, that's ridiculous, right? So you always want to make sure that that student feels safe while they're reporting it. I think it's also very important to communicate that circumstance with other administrators. You should never work in a vacuum. That's why there's a team. And I think that the approach from there is to get all of the information you need, and then to figure out who the students are that the claim is being made against, to talk to those students. You also want to make sure that the victim is always safe, and if they need to be, you know, kept separate, that they are. That's the priority in that situation. And then to go from there with how to discipline the person that's being claimed that they're the bully. Yes. Yes. Well, I think Attleboro does an excellent job of embracing diversity. We have a lot of extracurricular activities that kids can get involved in that celebrate the diversity we have. I think the approach is that, you know, it's got to be an inclusive environment for all. And you have to value the diversity and take an approach that, like, you have a lot to learn as an individual. Like, that's the value of diversity, right? You get to learn a lot. It's, you know, one of the things that I love and value about Attleboro is the diversity, and how we, you know, are constantly taking a wide array of students to, you know, celebrate. I think that that's really important. We do a senior spotlight every year, where we highlight certain seniors as they transition and move on from high school to college. And that's not just the top 5 students. It's not just the top 10 students. It's a wide array of students that were involved in many different aspects of the community. And we celebrate that. So that's how we deal with it in Attleboro. I mean, if your daughter's not comfortable, I mean, that's something that, you know, I would hope that you would talk to somebody and find her, a niche for her where she could become comfortable. Yeah.
Can you speak for some of the new challenges that high schoolers face today, and how would you address those challenges at the school?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that teenagers face today is that they're always plugged in. They don't ever get a break. So when I think of, like, my high school experience and the experience of people today, like, I would leave school and I would have a break from the people that I was spending my entire day with. That's not really the case for kids now. They're constantly in touch with friends and constantly in touch with the people that they go to school with. If they've had a bad day, it's hard to get away from it. And so I think that's a real challenge for kids nowadays. They're less in touch with, like, nature in the outside world. I know that sounds like kind of ridiculous. Like, I'm not, you know, it's like saying they should go for a hike, but, like, they're less present to the world around them. And I know that, you know, as I've moved on in my career and I've gotten more responsibilities, it's something that I try to be very cognizant of. So, like, I don't want my son to say, like, "Mommy, put your phone away," right? That breaks my heart, because I'm like, well, he's right. Like, I need to be present. I think that's the biggest challenge. And I think one of the ways we address that is giving kids an opportunity to be mindful and have a moment where they can just take a deep breath and decompress. Something that I've tried in my classroom before is, before a test, I have everyone do, like, 5 minutes of put your phone away, close your eyes, and let's just focus on our breathing. And I've had kids say that they love it. Like, can we do more of that? Like, sure, I guess. It's just like a silly little thing, but, like, it goes a long way. And I think that we need to be supportive of giving students the opportunity to have those moments, because they'll be better off for it. You know, we're educating the whole student, and there's a huge social emotional component. that comes into play that I think we often sort of forget about because we get so wrapped up in curriculum. Any other questions? Yeah.
Tell us what a great classroom looks like, and talk to us about what a great school looks like.
So a great classroom to me is one where there's a lot of student voice. So when I walk into a classroom and I can just tell that it's a great classroom, no matter what the teacher is doing, students are fully engaged, and you can tell because they're verbalizing what they're doing. So that might be in the form of an active discussion going back and forth with the teacher. It might be in the form of collaborative work that's occurring in the classroom where the kids are grouped and they're energized about what it is that they're talking about. It might be in the form of a presentation that's going on that's student-led. So to me, that's the sign of a really, really good classroom. One where like the teacher is more of a facilitator than just, a talking head at the front of the room. A great school to me is one where the kids are really energized and excited about what they're doing. And one where, it's inclusive and they're excited about what their classmates are doing too. It's not just what they're excited about. And so for me, that's, just walking around a school and even seeing the different ways that they celebrate diversity in the building. I think that that's a great way to see, a place where kids want to be. How much a school is bustling after dismissal, I think, is another indication of how good a school is. It's a place that the kids want to be. When I was a student, school was my second home, right? I felt like I spent more time there sometimes than at home. Like I always went home to eat and sleep. I think that that's a really positive sign of a really good school. So yeah. You're welcome. Yeah.
How does it work at Attleboro High School with kids who are not super high achievers in the classroom and tend to get into trouble? What do you feel is the best form of discipline for those kinds of kids, and how do you approach that?
So they do tend to get in trouble, or I think finding something that they're excited about. So I had an experience where there was a student that was sort of struggling, and I was approached by an administrator to see if I could kind of mentor that student and create a place for them to keep them out of trouble, and I was completely on board with that. In fact, I ended up having a great relationship with that student, and the plan that administration put into place for that student worked successfully. It kept that student out of trouble and motivated them in their classes. I think it's really like a case-by-case situation. It's all about figuring out what drives that student and finding a place for them to be engaged. So we had another student that was struggling and found out that they really liked the performing arts. So we gave them the opportunity to audition for the school play, and they ran with that. So it's all about taking that time to get to know them and figuring out where they're going to be most successful. Yeah.
So if a student violates, say something in the uniform
Yep.
policies, are kids suspended at?
Well, it depends on the situation. I mean, are kids suspended in general in Attleboro? Yes, as I'm sure is the case in all schools. But do we suspend a kid and then expect them to return and be better? I would say that that's never going to work, right? Like there has to be some other intervention, because it doesn't work with my 4-year-old. It's not going to work with a 14 or a 15-year-old either. Yep.
Other questions for Christina? Christina, let me ask you one more. And then
Yeah.
give you a chance to wrap up.
Okay.
When you think back to your years at Attleboro, particularly most recently your work as the leader of the science department, what's one or two things that you're especially proud of that you'd like to highlight for us?
One thing that I'm really proud of is I feel like if you walk down the wing of the science department today versus if you did it 5 years ago, you would look into some classrooms and say, that doesn't even look like the same teacher. And what I mean by that is we had a lot of classrooms that were just sort of what we know as chalk and talk, where there would be a teacher in front of the room and they would be putting notes on the board and the kids would be jotting down those notes. You walk down that hallway now and we have veteran teachers where you walk by their classrooms and their desks aren't in rows anymore. They're in collaborative learning groups and they have Chromebooks out on their desk and they're doing a PhET simulation. And I take a huge sense of pride in that because I like to believe that it's been my influence in coaching and mentoring these teachers that has given them the comfort to take risks. So that's something I'm very, very proud of. I'm also really proud of the contributions I've made to our leadership team. So although that's not specific to the science department, because I am the science department head, it gives me an opportunity to be a member of our leadership team. And I feel like I've made some really positive contributions to different initiatives on that team. Like we do an Observe Me week where people open up their classrooms and allow other people to just come in and watch what they're doing so that we can get different ideas. It creates a lot of camaraderie and a really positive culture in the school. I've led the Pride Block initiative, which is like an X block where kids get to sign up for various things that are not specific to curriculum that they might not have had any other opportunity to do. So that's something else that I'm really proud of. So I would say that in the last 4 years, that would be what I'm most proud of. You're welcome. All right. So I guess just in closing, I'd just like to say that what I think is most important to know about me is that I'm not just passionate, but I'm also a really committed educator. I think that the fact that I've spent so many years in Attleboro is indicative of that. I'm not someone that's just looking at like the next jump off point. I'm actually someone that's looking for a place that is one that I can commit to and see change through. That's really, really important to me. I'm a hard worker. I know that that's like pretty trite. You probably hear a lot of people say that, but I'm plugged into work as often as I can be, which includes weekends, because it really matters to me to do well. I'm my own worst critic. I expect the best out of myself, and if someone's not happy with me, I guarantee you I'm already not happy with myself. So that matters to me, and I'm beyond reflective. I have been told many times that I think too much, because doing well matters to me so much. So I'd say I want to leave you with that. All right. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to welcome our third finalist this evening, Miss Purnima Vadhara. So please join me in welcoming Purnima. Come on up.
So I guess I'm going to do a quick introduction. I have a couple of minutes. I always find this part the most challenging because I have 25 years of experience and I've been given 3 or 4 minutes to do a quick opener. So I want to share a lot with you, but I'll try to be concise. So for the 25 years I've been in education, I've been primarily, I would say, half between a teacher and half an administrator. So you've got that rich background of both experiences. For me, I've taught science and math in the Boston Public Schools, and led the science department at that time, and that was for about 10 or 11 years. Then went on to do my master's degree at Harvard and went on for administration, planning, and social policy. I felt I wasn't doing enough in the classroom and I had more to give and more ideas. Then went on to Newton South High School as the vice principal of a very, very large school of a diverse student body, and stayed there for 3 years and did some really amazing work. That was my canvas. I felt like I was in a kid with a candy jar of trying out new things, and the principal said, you just go with it. I hope our principal will say that too. You know, try this out and try this out. And so a lot of the interdisciplinary work of hooking up teachers together, I initiated, wrote a lot of grants for the school, took 22 kids on a plane to India for a part of exchange program, God bless me, and we all lived through that. It was amazing. Initiated a China program there, so I had a lot of rich experiences, and I was also teaching, so the administrators also taught a class, so it was a real full day of between discipline, between teaching and learning, and between trying out initiatives. That was my Newton sort of lifestyle. At that time, Newton South and Newton North, I don't know if you know the community, there's 2 big high schools. They cut one of the vice principals each due to budgetary reasons, and so still right now it's gone from 2 to 1, so I had to leave because I was not senior, I didn't have seniority at that time, and so went on to Somerville and to a K-8 school, and so I was very overconfident as I went to Somerville, and I said, well, I've been in the big leagues of high school, how can a K-8 be? This is going to be a piece of cake, and I went to stretch my muscles a little bit, and oh my God, that was the hardest experience of my life. And so for me, not knowing one thing about what Dibbles was or what certain assessments were, and kids were running around in the building crazy, certain parents lived in the building and certain parents I never saw, and so I was walking into a lot of things, moving parts. and so had the challenge of bringing a community of very diverse learners together, and especially the socioeconomics of Somerville, where people earned a lot of money and then earned very little money. And so we had the same kids, and equity was big in the classroom. At that time, so I had 2 children, and so my kids were in high school, and I wanted to be mother and be there for them in their last years. And my commute, because we moved to Natick, was very far from me from Somerville, went on to Maynard and went on to the high school there. And unfortunately, that was my second budget cut. And for 3 years, they morphed the position into a half-time athletic director, half-time vice principal. And so as much as I'm part in good shape as an athletic director, that wasn't what I do best. And so I've gone on to Norwood. I do feel Norwood for me is not as diverse as I would like to be. I am the diversity in Norwood, so I get all of the questions. For me, Milford is an absolute perfect population to be with. You know, where kids are from all different backgrounds, your families are from different backgrounds, you're in a school that's budding with new initiatives and new administration, and I work very well with that population. So sorry for the long sort of spiel, and I take all your questions and I welcome them. Yes. So not too often, which I'd like to, practice my skills a little bit more than I should right now. Some of our ELL parents do come to me, and so they speak very little English, so I will help out with that piece. I'm not going to say my Spanish is perfect and in great articulation, but I definitely can get by and support parents. ¿Parla español? No, okay, un poquito. Yes.
What's your biggest challenge in your role right now in your role?
I would say for me, because I deal with a lot of student discipline, for me it's allowing students that opportunity to really reflect on their actions. And so that you need time to do that piece. So if there is a discipline issue, I think we're kind of quick to say, okay, here, detention, suspension, and you go back to school. And so that processing piece is always a challenge. I think for students, if you want a different behavior, they need to understand what they've done. So those are conversations that take time. You need to get parents on board with the conversation. And for me, closing the loop with an issue is always challenging. So if there's an interaction between a student and a faculty member where there was disrespect involved, I want to have that conversation with the student so they can close the loop and forge that relationship again. And I always find that challenging. It's making sure people are in the right place of mind to make sure that that's happening. I always tell the students, you're going to have adults in the world, you're going to have relationships in the world, things are not going to go the way you want them to. And I mean, for me, it's creating resiliency in students. It's the ability to bounce back. We're not going to hold this for you for life. You've had a bad day, you've served sort of your time, you understand what you've done, close the loop, form that relationship again. So I think it's easier said than done, but it takes somebody who can really facilitate difficult conversations. And for me, I've had 12 years of seeing everything. I've seen it all, from vaping to a case on rape, to just extreme situations, to disrespect in the classroom, to cutting class, to seen it all, dealt with it all. So I'm very experienced, and I think I will bring sort of the table where people feel very comfortable coming to me, and that's step one. So students, faculty, if there's an issue, you're going to come to me, and you're going to feel open and heard, and I will work with you. It's not going to be something I'm going to put off on the side. If you've come to me, there's an issue, I'm going to take it seriously, or a parent. So just time spent on that student discipline piece, I would say, is challenging. Yes?
How do you nurture a positive school culture among students, and how would you do the same for that?
So a positive culture, I think that's the most important part. If you don't want to be in the building, doesn't matter what your role is, you're not going to perform really well. So if you ask students, do you want to come into school every morning, and the answer is not really, and if you don't see your faculty sort of fired up and passionate about coming into work, that trickles down to the kids. So I think a positive school culture is one that folks feel safe, I mean, if you're not safe and you don't feel that, and safety can mean your opinions are heard, you're not being bullied, you're physically safe, you're mentally, emotionally in a good place to be safe. So they're easier said than done, but it's creating a nurturing environment where opinions are welcomed. And so you have a curriculum which forces you, to hear students' perspectives. So you work with your teachers on creating a curriculum where students appropriately voice their concerns. Where there's time to advocate for certain things. There are ways that kids can come in and allow decisions to be made in the school in a safe way. So a culture that feels safe, that you feel happy and you feel connected. I think for me, I'm a data person, so I'm going to look at the data on kids. And so if one of the biggest questions I asked is, how many of you feel connected to at least one adult in the building? And that's part of a youth risk survey or other data collections that we have. And if it's 0, that's huge. So there's not one adult that you feel connected to, man, we've missed out. So we need to nurture those relationships where kids can come to us, where faculty can come to us, where you feel safe, you feel valued, where parents are heard and they're welcome and they're respected. Of course, I'd like to hear kids advocate for themselves. I'm a big proponent on that. And so I'll always say, before mom comes in, have you spoken to your teacher? Have you done that piece? Have you spoken to your guidance counselor? What have you kind of done with that piece? And of course, I want to talk to mom. It's not like I don't, and I'm just singling out moms. I mean, dad too. But I want to create that advocacy for the kids to do. Yes. Purnima. Purnima. Yes. How do you know that? I'm so impressed. That is so, I have never heard that. I'm the only diversity with Purnima ever, usually, so I'm so glad to hear that. Purnima means full moon. Yes, it does. It means, and everything in India is symbolic, so you just can't say moon. There's a story behind that. So full moon is somebody who radiates their energy in a very positive way, who's inspirational. This is my grandmother talking. She's dead, but I've heard this my whole life. And she's the one who named me my name. So somebody who's radiant in energy, very positive and inspirational to others. And so hopefully I can walk out and you can remember Purnima means full moon, and hopefully I've done my part for my grandmother. So I was born in India, and I came here when I was 6 years old, but I've gone back and forth many, many times. I've brought my students, so that's the first thing I'd love to do here. If you guys want to travel, we've got a lot of things covered. We don't see India on that piece. I'd love to open that up for a conversation. But I would say I'm definitely Indian in my heritage and my heart, but from the States. So most of my school system, I grew up in New York. So I'm a New Yorker. I love the Yankees. Please do not hold me for that, But I'm a New Yorker, but most of my life I've been in Boston in my educational background and my professional career. But I do love to travel back to India. It's where my heart is. Yes.
Does Norwood High School deal with school choice and kids opting out to go to other schools and districts? And how does the administration there deal with that?
Yeah, so we have a couple of charter schools nearby, Catholic schools that pull our kids away. So, I would say a couple of things. Going out to 7th and 8th graders at an early level, and not just, hey, it's the end of the 8th grade year and let's market, what Norwood High is doing. I would say starting early and forging those relationships. I think we do a very good job in fostering mentorships between our middle and our high school. So, I was part of that initiative where creating a buddy system of our juniors and seniors who go out to 7th and 8th graders and talk about some of their experiences in a safe way and say, this is what high school is going to be like, because you may say whatever and we may say whatever, but if a 16-year-old cool-looking really guy says something to a 13-year-old, that's cool. So we want to market sort of what's going on in our school appropriately, get out to some of those parent nights, reach out to some of the parents. So we have many, many opportunities for parents to come in other than there's step-up day. We have a curricular night for parents just on curriculum. So we have a showcase of work in that night. So we've got the science department that displays. So, and it's a competition. So we've made it sort of like this academic competition. So science department, you know, they show off their robotics and things that they're doing. English department shows off their work, and so science usually wins. I'm sorry, I'm a science person. But we like to showcase our work and connect sort of what we're doing and to parents. And we do get a lot of kids that way. So we try to maintain our kids. Yes?
Hi. So you already answered that. I had a question about why you seem to move on every couple of years, so thank you for that. And just, I guess very simply, like, so you've been an assistant principal for quite a while. What do you enjoy the most?
Yeah, so I think, and I want it to be very open because I think it's very important to be open. I'm a budget crisis in 3 schools, I'm sorry. Like it's, I would want to stay, I want this to be my home. So for me, your second part of the question, I'm sorry, could you repeat? Favorite part of my job. Truly, and I'm not just saying this because I have kids in the audience over here, it's connecting with students. It really is. It's to allow, students who are doing things appropriately and right to be recognized, and those who are not to have opportunities to grow. And I know kids are all different. Not every kid is going to go to college. Not every student is an athlete. Not every whatever. So there's no sort of one size fits all, but those conversations are so big to me. So I'll go home and I'll say, my God, that was such a difficult scenario. And I've seen the growth in a couple of months. So I'm sort of their personal trainer. So I like to go to the gym. And so my trainer really pushes me because I'm like, I'm done and I'm quitting. And they're like, no, you're not, because you're going to go back here and we're going to do it this way now. And I am their personal trainer. I'm not going to let you quit. I'm going to allow you to grow, and I'm right there for you. And I'm going to watch that growth because that gives me a high. That gives me a lot of satisfaction when I go home. So, love to be with kids. Yes? You want me sure. So I would say every school I've been at, I've got grants on science and technology to various Chromebooks in the classrooms, but at that time we didn't have one-to-one, to travel opportunities for teachers. I've written all of those grants. And so I think my doctoral work, and I'm finishing that up in June, hopefully, has really taught me how to write concise, write well, and think of the needs of when the grant is finished. What are you going to do beyond that piece to factor that in there as well? So there's an art to kind of grant writing. We kind of take things in, and then we forget to, what do we do when the grant's over? Like we don't have the training. So I initiate that in some of the writing that I do as well. So I think I'm very versed in looking out for free money. There's so much free money out there. There's a lot of people who want to donate and to schools, and it's just a matter of tapping into some of those opportunities.
So given that your name means full moon and radiate enthusiasm and inspire, what have you done in the past, your past experiences with your faculty to inspire them to be better educators and to be engaging with students?
That's a brilliant question. Now you're putting my name to the test. So that's an awesome question. So for me, I'm going to think back to my days of Somerville. And at that time where I walked into a staff that everybody had their door closed and we're not sharing anything and I just want to teach and please go away. So that was me walking into Somerville, and here I am buzzing with collaboration and ideas, and I want you to hook up and talk, and they thought I was nuts. So I tried to inspire through small dosage of growth. And so I found the pockets of the building that were like-minded like myself, and we hooked up and we shared out some best practices, and we allowed teachers to be in another classroom to share out some of that practice without an evaluation piece attached to it. So nobody was like, hey, I got you, or you messed up, but they actually learned. So think about it. This is the only profession that's so isolated. You have engineers and doctors and lawyers. Everybody talks. They talk about their work. They talk about the growth. We need to create those opportunities. So I would say year 1 of Somerville, I had about 5 or 6 teachers that shared out. And year 3 that I was there, we had 45 teachers that were on a cycle for sharing our growth. And that, I would say, maybe radiates a little bit of my name. And they would say, you know what, I was very much inspired that for me, walking into a classroom and feeling safe and taking a risk and showing off to my colleagues that it's okay if I messed up, this is how I do things, and we talked about that, was huge. And so you allowed me to take that risk, Purnima, and I walked out of there saying, my God, that was great for me. If I allowed somebody who was not even open to their classroom to take a risk and to allow others in their classroom and talk about teaching and learning, that was the first step towards something really big. Yeah. Yes.
I'm not sure if you've had any experience from the other districts that you've been in, but Milford tends to have a very large population, staff related to each other, staff related to students, throughout the whole district. And when it comes to disciplinary, or whether it be a student or a staff member, have you ever had any experience with that? And if not, how do you anticipate handling that?
So Norwood, everybody's related to everybody. People are married to each other, and there are 3 people with the same last name. In fact, our 2 deans, when I walked in, Richard Cormier and Colleen Cormier, boy, I did not know they were married, and there were 2 deans in the building for like 4 months. And then I would see them eating lunch together, and I said, is something I'm missing? And somebody pulled me over and said, Norwood, everybody knows everybody. Everybody's related to everybody. And so, yes, I think I've been living in that school right now. And I would say the challenges would be definitely word gets out a lot faster than sometimes it should, and things should be confidential, and sometimes they're not. So it's really stressing the fact of, here's some confidential information. If I'm sharing that out with a teacher, I will make sure to say, look, this is between you and I for the sake of the student, and this is all I can share with you, but I would appreciate that confidentiality. The student needs that piece. So I know that people are talking. Things are getting out faster than they should, and it can be tricky. And so decisions can be tricky too, because you've got a cohort who meets after school, who are married to each other, who are related to each other, and they may be, pockets of, if they disagree with me, there's a lot more disagreement because people are together. So you have to kind of walk in with that mindset, thinking these are different perspectives, and I know you guys talk, and I acknowledge that piece. So I said, I know you guys are related to each other, you guys are going to the movies later on or whatever, but right now we're faculty, and I'm in administration, and we're walking out together for the sake of our students, and we're going to keep it confidential or whatever. Sure. Do you have any questions as a student? Please ask me if you do.
Actually, if you were put into a situation where you got a bullying case, how would you handle it?
So she's given me the hardest question I asked for this myself, right? So for me, I take all of that very, very seriously. Respect and safety is top key for me. Respect in your body, respecting each other, respecting differences. And if you're feeling bullied, I'd like to know about when is this happening, where is it happening, did it happen once, is it repeated, is it really bullying, or is it a one-time instance? Does it take place? And we know that the data will tell us that bullying takes place often outside the classroom into large pocketed areas, so the lunchroom where there's supervision is less, the hallways, after school. So I'd like to know what the time is that this is happening. And then I want to work towards creating a resolution. So I want to make sure that you feel safe at the end of the day. So that requires conversations with the other student to see their perspective. It requires other students who may be witnesses of this to make them part of a conversation. It requires parents to reach out and to have conversations at home. And I think it's a culture. You build in a culture where you want, as a student, as a faculty member, to walk in feeling supported. So if you've come to me and you're feeling unsafe, I want to acknowledge that piece. And my goal is to make sure that you have a closure and that you're walking in. And so sometimes it's separating students in classrooms for good. Sometimes it is creating relationships where, a student can't go to a certain class. You need to be separated. Or it's having conversations where you can come back together. And sometimes it's just somebody acting out and getting attention because they have been bullied themselves. And so those conversations are important too. Yes, and then I'll take yours. Yes. Oh, totally. I am all over it now. Since my kids are off to college, and I said, now I can live. So I have 2 students. One is at Johns Hopkins, one is at Northeastern. We just pay the bills. I need this check here, fine. Here, this here, fine. And make sure your grades are this par and you're not having any trouble. So everything else, I have time in my life now. So for the last 3 years, I feel like I've evolved into this new life. Mothers can kind of attribute to what this metamorphosis is going on. And so I'm at games, I'm at events. I don't know some of the athletic stuff, so I'm just, okay. So you'll hear me shout out things that maybe that was the wrong game and I'm learning, that's okay. But definitely music events, and I want to be part of the kids, and they love to see me there. So I think that's the way to connect with students. to see them at their extracurricular activities, robotics. I'm big on science and technology, so some of their robotic competitions. And yeah, I'd love to see wherever you are, swim team, this team, whatever you're doing, I want to check out. Yes.
Quick question with regard to, say, like dress code in schools and cell phone usage policy. Do you have maybe some new ideas that you could bring, or how have you helped handle those problems at other schools?
So let me talk about cell phones first, because that is the biggest gift and the biggest nuisance in our life, but they're both equally. So I would say the biggest gift in terms of communication, in terms of safety, in terms of having access to technology and quick internet browsing, awesome. The nuisance is a big distraction in teaching and learning, and often cyber stuff that maybe not be appropriate for kids at a certain level. So for me, at least for teachers, as small as this sounds, we've purchased those shoe plastic racks, whatever they're called, with inserts. And so as students are walking in, one of the expectations now in Norwood is you walk into your class and you put your phone on ring or off and you put your phone in the rack and it's visible in the front. So you shut down and we're ready to learn. And so if you, I think that's really curbed a lot of what we're doing. And so first it's I don't have a cell phone, and then we hear it vibrating. And so it took a little time to get into the policy of like, this is what we just do. And it became a norm after a couple of years that we're here to learn. And we need a phone, and sometimes it's an appropriate use of technology to use it, but if you have a one-to-one, you really don't need your phone. So when it was appropriate, we would have times it would be appropriately taken out, but we've also gone to one-to-one, so there's really no need to be on your phone. We have allowed phones in the hallways and during lunchtime. So we do have access. It's not like completely limiting kids from something that exists in their world. They need to live with it. But it's just opportunities of when. And so your other piece was dress code.
Right, situations that you might have had that you dealt with discipline or changing culture.
Absolutely. So certain cultures are extremely provocative in their dress codes, and certain weathers will bring out, doesn't matter what culture you're in. So conversations that I need to have, and I wouldn't stereotype genders with this. So I would have conversations with males and females, and of course it's a little bit difficult to have the conversations with males, but it's fine. I'm old school. If it's distracting me, it's probably not appropriate. And so I'm going to let you know that. Maybe your parents at home feel it's okay, but this is a place in an institution of learning. So I always have sweatshirts, and I have a bunch of things in my office anyway as an appropriate use of just switch into something, because I shouldn't be seeing flesh. It's very distracting to teaching and learning. And so there's got to be, I'm not going to be here measuring your skirts. This isn't, old school that way, but if it's enough to draw attention and it's inappropriate attention, it shouldn't be in school. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about what they do that's really good, and what's something you think that they should do?
So in the current school I'm in now, I think in terms of what they do really well, I think the teachers have come such a long way in differentiating their instruction. I think the years of about 7-8 years ago, that was their professional development for the district, and that was their initiative. And I would say to today, teachers know that every student is going to be different in my classroom, and I need to meet the needs of those students. I need to make those relationships and get to know the kids and really understand what makes them work, what doesn't, who needs more time, who doesn't, who's got an emotional impairment, who doesn't. So, and what can we do to make sure everybody accesses their curriculum? So I think they're doing that really, really well. And that comes with not just a year, it's many, many years of work. Something that they're not doing so well, I would say they're a bit rigid, I'm being respectful, in opening up new ideas for curricular work or co-teaching, or just models that may look a little different than what they're used to. So walking into Newton, I created a class in physics and music and brought 2 teachers together. At Norwood, that would be very difficult. It's like, no, I teach physics, and why do you want me to hook up with music? And so that's my domain. And so it's coming. It's a work in progress. It's, for me, the science should not just be science separated from math. They're very much integrated in what we do. So having those opportunities to really integrate our learning is very important, and I think Norwood needs a little bit of work in that. Okay, so I guess I'm your full moon, okay? I'm the brightness that Milford is lacking. I'd love to, I'm filling big shoes, and I know that, but I do come with a wealth of information and experience, and I work with all different types of kids. You give me the challenge, and I will rise to that. I'm somebody at the personal level where my situation at home is at the point where I can give you 500%. And so I think that's also important in life. Somebody from a diverse background, we need to hire more diverse candidates. So please do your part and give your feedback. I mean, this is a campaign, I guess, right now. So I'm going to go all out and say, please look at my experience, look at my teaching background, feel the vibration you're feeling now. If you're feeling comfortable, you'll probably feel comfortable in my office as well. And we're going to have those great conversations and take the school to another level. So thank you.